Hey everyone, it's Mike with It's Pittsfield Tonight. I am here at Pittsfield City Hall in the council chambers with our mayor, Pittsfield Mayor Peter Marchetti. Thank you, Mayor Marchetti, for taking the time to do this today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So a lot has been being discussed. Budget hearings, which is always a busy time of year, plus it's an election year. And two of the things I want to talk about specifically are two proposals that you had put forward. The first one was a median safety proposal. And after I read it, I didn't like the part about Park Square, but I did understand what you were trying to do. It wasn't an anti-panhandling ordinance. It was specific locations standing on medians and islands. Can you, because you did catch a lot of heat over this, can you explain what it was you were trying to accomplish?
So if you were to be driving through the city and Park Square got totally misrepresented in the whole process, and we'll back up and kind of straighten that out, not that it matters because the ordinance failed miserably. When you were at the intersection of Park Square, say heading up from east, looking down at west and potentially turning to south, on a number of occasions you would see people run through 3 or 4 lanes of traffic and run back in order to, receive a donation that was coming from one of the lanes of traffic. And, I think from my perspective, where's the safety in that? We all know, and I talked about it being a median safety, pedestrian safety ordinance. I didn't talk about it as panhandling. I didn't talk about it as it might be the driver's fault that someone was going to get hurt, because clearly most of us that drive, when the light turns yellow, right, we floor it because we don't want to wait an extra 3 minutes. And so if someone is running back or forth, I didn't want someone to become, quote unquote, a hood ornament for somebody's car. And ironically, the week after it was defeated, I was shown some video of a car that was coming up South Street, looked like it was turning into Bank Row for Patrick's Pub, made a switch and came and ricocheted up over Park Square and back out onto the median. And quite frankly, if there was someone standing at that space, they would have been dead. They would have been hit by the car and dead. And so it was about median safety. When I picked the intersection of East and First, if you go by there, and of course, throughout the whole entire process, everyone said that, I'm making stuff up. There was always someone standing at that intersection, usually with their belongings, blocking all the signage, letting drivers know if you wanted to take a left to get onto Route 9 or Route 7.
And that's right in between the library and
and so
which on the way here today there was shopping carts.
You must have been seeing things, because no
I'm positive.
no one's there, and that was kind of some of the stuff. So, like, I picked intersections. I was called out because BRPC had done some studies and there were more dangerous intersections. But for me, these were the things that I was looking at. And yes, we used some traffic data to back it up. But when you are taking an intersection and having people block all the signage.
And you didn't just pull this out of the air. I'm assuming there were complaints and calls coming.
Well, I mean, I think if we remember the campaign, we talked about panhandling. We talked about aggressive panhandlers. We talked about, hey, if I come up and say, can I have $5? No, I don't carry any cash, and I walk away, oh, well, that was a panhandler. If I come up and I ask you for $5 and you tell me no, and then I grab you by the throat, that's no longer panhandling. That's
right.
Aggressive behavior. And, folks should call the police. Calling the police on someone who asks you for $5, it's not a criminal offense to ask someone for money.
Which was being discussed a lot at that time.
Correct. So, I mean, for me, it was discussed a lot during the campaign in 2023. Whether it's perception or reality, people are nervous. It was an opportunity to kind of change. We had talked about putting up signs that say, don't give change, be the change. Having a QR code, donate to like your favorite charity that handles,
which has worked for other communities.
But after doing the median safety and seeing the repercussions, we kind of walked away from that. And then picked up the camping ordinance.
So before we get into that, because that's another one you caught a ton of heat off, but so where does it stand with this median safety? Is it just?
So the city council voted it down 11-0. And, I was asked by another reporter, so what does this mean? Contrary to the national scene that's happening, I respect the democratic process. I proposed something that I thought would make the city safer. A whole mess of folks switched the whole dynamics. I had been called all kinds of names. I saw signs in Park Square that said, I hate poor people, and, yada, yada, yada. Whatever.
Which obviously is not the case, but so it is obviously a safety issue, because when my office was right there at that intersection, it did go a little extreme. It started with someone holding a sign to one day I looked out there and there's 4 people. They got chairs, a shopping cart, a boom box. He's working on a bicycle on a little 2-foot wide strip of concrete 6 inches away from cars. I mean,
Well, and right after the ordinance failed, maybe within a couple weeks after, someone sent me a picture of someone who was at the intersection of First and Tyler. So right now, all the construction that's happening in that area, and if you picture the old way that it was designed, if you were coming down First Street to head to BMC, you could continue straight on north, or there was the right turn lane that you just kind of veered off and headed up Tyler Street. That's all been torn up, and there was a person sitting in a chair in the middle of the roadway that was torn up with a sign.
I just don't see how that's not a safety issue, because who is at fault now that this has been discussed if something happens?
Well, but I mean, I think more importantly, we don't want to see anybody injured, right? And it was made out to be, and we can say the same conversations when we talk about the camping ordinance. It was made out to be that you were trying to pick on people. Look, it may be the person that was panhandling's issue, or it might have been the driver's issue. But at the end of the day, if you get hit by a car and you're dead, does it really matter whose fault it is?
Right.
I mean, sure, it does, because if it's the driver's fault, they'll be brought up on vehicular manslaughter or some other charges, but that doesn't bring the person back. And if it's the person's fault, I would never suggest that, doing something of that measure means that it's punishable by death, right? I mean, none of it makes any sense. And I guess for me, that was a learning experience of who's panhandling and why.
So then now we jump, let's do that, because I know you're on limited time. We jump right into the camping ordinance, which is directly connected to this. So that was another one. There was pieces of that I also was confused with. The camping on your own property, which I do know they asked to have that removed when it went to ordinance and rules, I believe.
Well, and I brought those forward, right? I mean, so there's 2 things. One.
So for those who don't know, what was the ordinance?
So it was banning camping on all public properties. And so, there's a little bit of overreach because the Parks Commission is really in charge of park properties, and there's already a park rule that says that you can't camp in parks, you can't be there after dusk. So it was codifying that and then expanding it throughout the city to, a variety of locations, North Street sidewalks, out in front of the bus station, in some of the city parking lots. And for me, it's interesting because since the Springside Park encampments, and when we finally cleaned up the encampments and we spent $20,000 doing the final cleanup to clean up that whole area, the city's Parks Commission was very intent on not letting encampments show up in the parks again. And for years now, tents are being tagged, people are being moved along. And of all of this, I'll give some real, you got me when you ask the question, where will they go, right? I mean, I think that all of this comes back to where will they go? And for me, I'm saying, okay, you can't camp in public. You can't do things that most people wouldn't do, right? You can't be walking down North Street and say, I have to go to the bathroom, and just step into some business or some business doorway, drop trow, go to the bathroom, regardless of which bathroom you're going, right? You can't do things like that. If you're living in the park or you're living on the bench at Pursa Park, you can't use those bushes as your bathroom. It's not sanitary, which, leads to things that I hadn't thought about as I was putting this stuff forward about where is the downtown bathrooms. So let's just pretend that we're living in a world that everything is perfect. I want you to come to First Fridays. I want you to bring your kids. I want you to grab a couple beers at the outdoor beer garden. But when you have to go to the bathroom,
there's nowhere to go,
right? So, okay, there's a problem that we need to solve. All of us in the city post the camping ordinance and some of the stories that were written. We got information about a company in Portland that sells porta potties that are permanent structures. Okay, let's look into them. $170,000 per unit.
Oh my God.
Exactly. That was.
And these would be in just public spaces?
So just public spaces. They're like stainless steel building, one toilet. The bottom of the toilets are, doesn't go all the way to the ground. So if there was an emergency and there was something that happened inside, someone fell, passed out, whatever the case may be, a passerby could see that someone was laying down, not on the toilet. There were, I'll call them peekaboo slots, where you could peek in if you had an emergency crisis to be able to see. That probably creates a whole new problem.
That's kind of creepy.
Right. It becomes a whole new thing. They were equipped with blue lights, which I had no idea why the blue lights were there. Apparently, the blue light on your skin hides your veins or helps disguise your veins, so you're not going to go into one of those facilities to shoot up or whatever the case may be. So,
which is an issue.
So there was another piece. So, all right, let's have the conversation about bathrooms and what can we do.
So this camping ordinance, though, it was basically you can't. It was that simple. You can't.
You can't camp in public properties.
Which isn't it already? Like if I decided, because people know who I am, so if I decided to grab my tent tonight, and I wanted to pick one of the parks, and say, well, I want to find out what the experience is. I watched that meeting where Jim McGrath said, on first contact, we don't ask them. We tell them that you don't have to go. I mean,
but on second contact, we provide you with all the information that you have to go.
But that is kind of wrong, isn't it? That I could technically go camp in the park tonight, because how could they tell me to go?
Well,
how could you pick and choose?
Well, right. And I think that what we're trying to say is that we're taking a humanistic approach to, all right, first let's find out who they are, what the issues are.
Right, because it is all unique.
And
when
then,
you talk about Springside, and I have to mention this, you and I were in there together once years ago with other city councilors and saw an incident where I was approached. I got to know the people living in that specific encampment very well. He had a mother that lived right down the street. He had a place he could have went. There were rules, though, he had to follow, and he wasn't willing to do that. So when people say, where are they going to go? Every situation is unique, and that is somebody who had local family, local places. One of the family members contacted me and said he's been told he can stay here. He can't stay here unless he's clean, though.
And I think that's the hard part with this issue, is that every circumstance is different, right? There are some that could have family to go to, but if you happen to be someone who has an addiction problem, you can come live with me, but you can't bring your drugs with you. Okay, well, then people are making choices, and I use that term loosely because I think when someone's in the throes of addiction, they may be making choices, but are they really making
No.
logical choices, right?
Not at all.
And I'm not trying to demean them in any way, shape, or form. So, I mean, I think that you've got that. You've got a whole host of other reasons as to why some folks don't want to come inside. And so I think we have to do it delicately, right? We're not, I'll give them a new phrase to call me, we're not the Gestapo showing up and saying, all right, we have the paddy wagon, we're throwing you and all your belongings in it. We're really trying to assess the situation. We're not going to let them live there for 6 months. It's days in the process, right? It's not, and what we want to be able to do is see if we can find an alternative.
Which now we fast forward to, because that ordinance did get shot down, but it's not completely gone,
No,
is
so
it?
the camping ordinance is actually still well on its way to being brought forward. When we came to public health and safety meeting, we did a presentation. I listened, and there was no intent of criminalizing anything. If you look at a lot of the city ordinances, they will refer you to chapter 4.5, section 1 or section 2. All laws have some kind of disciplinary something that goes with them, right? And they're either non-criminal or criminal offenses. Section 4.5-1 is criminal, 4.5-2 is civil, and even in this case, civil is paying fines. So does it make sense in the big picture, understanding all of the circumstances? So we came to the public health and safety meeting with a presentation asking to take section 4.5-1 out.
So there's no penalties,
So no criminal penalty.
Okay.
The civil penalties, I haven't taken out, because if there is no enforcement mechanisms, what good is an ordinance?
Right.
And then 2, we came back with you could remove the 3 days, right? What we were aiming for is people camping on private property without permission. So
Has that been an issue?
it has been an issue.
Okay.
When someone sees a vacant lot in between two homes or a vacant home, we have folks coming in and trying to get into the homes for, safety from the elements of the weather, or, to be a little warmer, or whatever the case may be. Or they're camping on a vacant lot next to them that's owned by a bank in Ohio who has no idea what's happening here. And so, all right, you're here. We're going to ask the question, do you have the owner's permission? If you tell us yes, and we know it's a bank in Ohio, we can come back and call the bank in Ohio and say, do you know you got people squatting on your property? And why are we doing that? Well, the neighbors on both sides
Well, yeah.
are concerned about what's happening in the middle. And, if we have a conversation with the business community, with everything that's happening right now, with perceptions, with folks sleeping in their doorways at night, urinating and defecating in their doorways that they need to clean up before their customers show up. They're making the case of the shoplifting and the issues that are on the rise now that some of this is happening. These businesses are suffering tons of impacts that has an economic value to our city. And, if I'm Bart Razor at Car Hardware, and I'm losing money from my store, and I have another store that's 50 feet over the property line into Lenox that's doing really well, do I need both stores?
Which we've seen a lot of stuff go to that area.
So, when we look at the big piece, if we talk to our downtown merchants who are really now getting engaged in this process and saying, hey folks, we need help. Look, I said at at the public health and safety meeting, I don't care if this ordinance sees the light of day, as long as we come up with solutions. So we've been talking solutions. What can we do for bathrooms in the downtown? I asked Aaron Forbush that night at ServiceNet, if we're gonna open the first, and it's gonna be open 7 days a week from 7 to 7, what will it cost from a city's investment to be open 7 to 7 the other way around? So we have a 24/7 place to go. I think people forget quickly, when I became mayor and the shelter at St. Joe was closing and everyone was moving here to the Pearl, St. Joe could hold up to 80 people. This shelter could do
45,
40,
right?
45. Where were they going? Mayor, you got a problem. Why is it my problem? I'm not in charge of the shelter. You guys are. Why'd you build a shelter that was too small? All right. Blame game doesn't help. What can we do? We got involved. We found a solution of the warming center at First United Methodist Church that was up from mid-January of 24 through the end of April 24. It opened December 1st, 24, closed April 30th of this year. So there was a place for folks to go at nighttime. When they did their point in time count, and we learned that on that particular moment in time, which I don't necessarily trust fully in those numbers because
It's always 100.
It's
That's what you
a
hear.
snapshot. It was 187.
Really?
16 of those 187 were completely shelterless.
Okay.
Now, I was meeting with an organization. They said, well, you got to do better. But wait a minute. The shelter, the warming center was open. There was room. We didn't close it. So those 16 people, if they didn't know about it, then we, and when I say that we, the city and the system, needs to do a better job. If they chose not to come in because they didn't like the rules or didn't like the staff or they didn't like the other folks that were living there or staying there the night, that's not on the city and that's not on the system.
And that's very common. I dealt with that for that year through
Right.
the encampments. They wouldn't leave. They didn't want to.
I think that everybody needs to kind of step back. I've heard 1,000 times, well, it could happen to you. I'm sure it could. But I think, and I've said it and I'll continue to say, I cannot advocate to let people live in conditions and circumstances that I actually think are less than what I would let my dog live in.
I agree, 100%.
Okay? And so I don't know what the answer is. And some, have gone out and criticized me that this conversation has already been happening long before I've done anything. This conversation has been happening for as long as I've been in the political arena. And we've never come up with solutions. And I think the city, I listened to your show the other day. I was very proud of you when you paid Mayor Tyre a compliment for something that she did. I was very proud of you. But that's the truth. The city
Made the investment.
has made the investment. And when you look at, and that was the other piece of my presentation, you've got the shelter that the city helped support. You've got the first, which is $4.6 million in a housing resource center that will provide showers and lockers and mailboxes and phone charging stations and a place for someone to be comfortable and a shared kitchen and services that may not be in your face services, but services if you decide that you want it to get them. You've got the transitional housing at Zion Lutheran Church, 9 units. You've got West Housatonic Street that's gone up pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
Another 27 units of transitional housing. You've got the old White Terrace Apartments, 592 Terrace, should be open by the end of this month with folks coming in, 41 more units. You've got the Wright Building and Jim's House of Shoes, another 30 couple units. We're working with Milltown for housing on the Woodlawn Avenue property. Westside Legends is working on some townhomes and some duplexes. I think it's 106 Wendell Ave, 28 more units of housing there. Hibbert School, the preliminary plans have come back. They gave us 3 options. Minimally, it's 22 more units of housing. Maximum, it's 50 more units of housing. There's another housing project in the makings, can't say who and where, of another 40 units if that is developed. So to be making the case that the city doesn't have a pretty aggressive approach to housing. Now, if you think I wanted housing and it was supposed to happen that fast,
Well, of course not.
Then we failed. But when you look at the Wright Building, and you know that that's a $19 million project, when you look at some of the other facilities, invested in the city right now with private and public partnerships, we're looking at $80 to $100 million of housing happening right now.
It is crazy, the cost of housing.
Yeah, and so,
It's-
like, we've got to just continue to try to do what we can do. And, you know, if you want to advocate for someone to live where there isn't running water and there isn't bathrooms, then you can continue to advocate for that. I can't.